Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome in. Happy College Football Saturday to you. It is like 50 degrees outside where I am at in Kansas City. Crisp fall day. Was wearing a hoodie and some shorts walking around at the farmer's market earlier today. It doesn't get much better than that, my friends. And especially when we've got a Big 12 day like we have on tap today. So the idea here, I was complaining on Twitter last week, if you saw that, about, speaking of the Big 12, Dave Portnoy and whatever his whole deal yelling at Michigan fans was last week, or excuse me, rather yelling at Ohio State fans last week. These pregame shows, right? College Game Day, Big Noon Kickoff, which is in Ames, Iowa. I do appreciate that. But the fact that they have just turned into what they've turned into, like guys cutting WWE promos, I promise you I'm not going to be yelling at anybody. I promise you I'm not going to be cutting fake WWE promos here on this show. And these shows in general do not cover the Big 12 enough. So I thought, well, what if I try to put together a little something, get the people in Big 12 country what they want, better pregame. So we're going to try it today. And I love this bracket, Cat. Big Kurt's Kickoff. That is much better than what I came up with. I will use that next time. If you're okay with that bracket, Cat, I will use that next time. Big Kurt's Kickoff, assuming that there is a positive reaction to all of this today. So, yes, Big Kurt's Kickoff it is. Thank you all for being here. Please do like the video. Please do subscribe to the channel. If you have not, make sure you're subscribed to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter at ofbnews.com or click the link in the description of the video. So what I have for you today, we got some good stuff. Not only are you going to hear from me, okay, which I know is great. That's why you're all here. That's why we're all here, right? But you're also going to hear from people around the Big 12. So I had a chance throughout the week to catch up with Josh Furlong to talk about Utah's impressive performance last week and how things are setting up for the Utes. And by the way, I'll talk a little bit later about how I saw somebody rank Utah as high as number 8 right now after what they did in week 1. So there is a lot to like about what's going on with Utah right now. I'm going to talk with Alec Bussey, who covers Iowa State, about Cyhawk, which is going to kick off our mornings at 11 a.m. And then I'm going to talk to Kevin Flaherty from KC Sports Network. He's covered Kansas for a long time. Perfect guy to talk about KU-Mizzou because he knows this rivalry inside and out. And he told such a great story about that rivalry that I'm excited for you guys all to hear. And that's kind of where I want to start on this. Like, to me, it feels like a mini rivalry week in the Big 12. And I'm so ecstatic for that. We're at a place where the sport is at, where we get less and less of this. And so many of the matchups are just not as exciting. You have weird matchups because the conferences are bizarre. You know, I mean, USC and Maryland, UCLA and Rutgers, like we're getting all. And look, I can't completely abstain the Big 12 from that, right? There are just some obscure matchups where you're like, what is, UCF, K-State? Like it's nothing against any of the schools, but nobody is playing regionally like who they really, quote unquote, at least to me, should be a lot of times anymore. So when we get a chance to have that happen, we need to make it happen. And, I see Locked On West Virginia in the house. I see my guy Paul there. We've got the Backyard Brawl coming up next week, which is going to be another excellent thing for everybody in the conference. But to have KU-Mizzou today, to have SMU Baylor, a couple of old Southwest Conference rivals there, to have Houston and Rice, it's awesome. And then obviously Cyhawk as well, Iowa State, which has been one of the rivalries that I've got to give credit to. They continue to play. I mean, conference realignment hasn't screwed that one up quite yet. So I'm appreciative of that. But I'm just so ecstatic to have all these games actually be here and have some teams regionally playing teams that they should be every single year. This goes beyond just the Big 12. We're talking, saw someone mentioning like Oklahoma, Nebraska. I had forgotten that they kind of re-upped that series. I think they've got another couple of games coming up later on that are scheduled, sort of like KU-Mizzou. KU-Mizzou is this year, next year, and then it's 2030, 2031. So people are trying, but those are all games that should be played every single freaking year. So I want to get you as prepared as I can for those. Get ready for it. Wow. All right. Harambe in the house and on board with the Hawks. Love that. Okay. Listen, I think I will be rooting for Kansas as well. All right, everybody. This T-shirt. Sorry, Taco. This T-shirt, Big 8 T-shirt. I've gotta be rooting for Kansas. I know Mizzou was in the Big 8, but Mizzou ditched their fellow Big 8 brethren to go to the SEC. So I've got to stick up for the Hawks as far as that is concerned. And speaking of that, after the experience that I had in Columbia, I will caution any Kansas fans, if you might be listening to this, going to that game. I applaud you for going to the game. You should. It's going to be an awesome electric atmosphere, but be careful with the Mizzou fans, because the way they treated K-State fans, boy, can only imagine what it's going to be like for Kansas. But KU-Mizzou should be an awesome game. Like, one of the things about that game not being played over the last few years, how great would those matchups have been between Lance Leipold and Eli Drinkwitz? As much as I love to hate on Drinkwitz for what he is, he's a pretty good troll of a personality. But he clearly has been a good coach, and he's won 21 games the last 2 years. Kansas had the 9-win season 2 years ago. Last year had plenty of talent. They could have competed with Mizzou. Watching those teams play, and then in 2022, had they played a non-con game at the beginning of that season when Jalen Daniels was doing what he was doing, like, it would have been incredible. Would have been incredible to watch all that. But unfortunately, we were not treated to that, because that's what conference realignment has done to us. Baylor and SMU, maybe not quite as like historic, but this is a really, really important game for the league today. SMU being a playoff team from last year, lost early in the season at home to BYU last season. It didn't matter. They still made the playoff. Another chance for the Big 12 to do that and put a pelt up on the wall that is much needed, because there hasn't been much of that. You've got North Carolina up there. You got UCLA up there. But those are really the only two pelts out of a bunch of opportunities that the Big 12 had in week one, and kind of swung and missed there. And the other thing is just, Baylor, I said this offseason, Baylor, you can argue, is the most important team in the Big 12 because of the opportunities that they had. Now, a huge piece of that was that they were playing Auburn. That game's already done. They got physically pushed around by Auburn, but they have this matchup against SMU. And then to kick off conference play, 2 of their first 3 games or is it the first 2? Arizona State and then K-State. Now, maybe that K-State game won't be quite as important. We'll talk about the Wildcats later. They've got Army today. Not going to have Dylan Edwards. It's the injury update from Pete Thamel earlier this morning, which is certainly unfortunate. But Baylor needs to get back on track. I think it's one of the teams with the highest, one of the highest ceilings in the Big 12 because of what that offense is. But their defense is going to have to be better. And the problem for Baylor is that they are now going up against another mobile quarterback in Kevin Jennings. And anybody who watched that game last week against Auburn, it was glaringly obvious what the biggest issue was for Baylor. It's just they couldn't stop the quarterback run game. I mean, they couldn't stop the run game in general, but it was Jackson Arnold who was leading the charge there. And that's a guy he's very mobile. Chris Collinsworth, here's a guy. He's very mobile, but that's not somebody known for it quite as much as I would say Kevin Jennings, at least at this point in his career. Jackson Arnold, I think, ran all over Alabama last year. So maybe I'm overstating that a bit. The point is, you've got another tough task. There's an injury update I'll cover later on for Baylor. Their best defensive tackle was deemed to be basically out earlier in the week. Now it sounds like may actually be able to give it a go. There's an important injury update in the Kansas-Mizzou game. Their linebacking core that makes me a little more optimistic about the Jayhawks as well. I'll cover all that later on today. But yeah, I think this is a really important game to get Baylor going. Big 12 needs non-con pelts on the wall, and Baylor is a team that I still think by the end of the year, I would not bail. I'll put it that way. I would not bail on Baylor right now. I think Baylor still has an opportunity to accomplish a lot. And the offense, Sawyer Robertson is a little bit enigmatic, a little bit boom or bust, but he still threw for over 400 yards. Like, it was a really good. They have some weapons, man. Trigg, the tight end, like, I started watching that guy. I'm like, where did this dude come from? And he had a hell of a game against Auburn. Like, Baylor has some real potential there. Baylor needs to get on track and not let this season spiral out of control, because what you're at risk of with Baylor is basically exactly what happened last year. Just a crappy start where everybody kind of cuts bait and the talk heats up about Dave Aranda's job security again. And they don't really get a chance to be the team that they could be because everybody has just kind of left them for dead. That could happen very easily because if you lose this game, you've got a rummy next week and then Arizona State. And now that game is in Waco, but that could be 1-3 really fast. And that's the point where, once again, we would be back to talking about Dave Aranda's job security and nobody expecting much out of that team this year. So huge game today for Baylor. And, for anybody who is too online, who is chronically too online, like obviously I am, SMU fans are annoying, man. for Big 12 Twitter's sake, that is probably the most important game of the day, that Baylor takes care of SMU, right? That is probably the most important game of the day. Cyhawk, Iowa State, Iowa. I've talked about this before. It is obviously important for the Big 12. It would be great to have Iowa as one of the pelts up on the wall, Big 10 team. But Iowa is such a meme in college football at this point. Everybody just expects them to go 8-4, play lights out defense, and have one of the worst offenses you've ever seen at the Power 4 level. And Mark Gronowski, throwing for 44 yards against Albany last week, did absolutely nothing to dispel that. In fact, it furthered it because the offseason narrative was, hey, Iowa got so much better at quarterback, and then it looked like a joke in week one, that I don't know how much Iowa State gains for the Big 12 by winning that game. I feel like, and it's not fair because Iowa is still a good team. A team that plays good enough defense to win 8 games every single year is still that's a solid team. It's not a great team. It's not one that we need in the playoffs, Eli Drinkwitz or Tony Petitti, but it is still a pretty solid team, and winning that game should mean something. But I don't know that it holds quite the same weight that, say, a Baylor beating SMU or a KU beating Mizzou would, if we're being completely honest. And it's just because Iowa has been such a joke on offense for so long. Like, people don't respect Iowa. Iowa is a joke across the college football world. And I don't mean that, like, people think Iowa's a joke of a program. If there are any Iowa fans out there that would be angry at hearing that, but it's you guys, you have to get it. I feel like almost more than anybody else. You've seen how much your program gets memed, okay? Don't blame me. The internet has taken a hold of this, okay? The internet has taken a hold of it. It is not me. Houston Rice, all right? 2 years ago, what happened in that game? Dana Holgerson kind of brought on the end of his time there by losing that game to Rice. That's not one that you can be losing. I have heard some optimism from Houston fans in my Twitter mentions, at least this week. Now, in fairness, there was a guy with a burner, or like 7 burners, who I think was tweeting me the same thing about his, hot take of the his hot take of the week was that anyway. Lost my train of thought there. Looking at the chat, guys. I'm sorry. I got caught up there. Oh, his Big 12 hot take of the week was that Houston was going to win the Big 12. I got that like 17 times from a guy with like 7 burners. So maybe I'm just judging it on that, but it was a shutout. Defense looked great. Sheil Wood is gone, right? Houston's defensive coordinator now at Texas Tech. Highly encouraging to see the defense pitch a shutout in week 1, no matter who they're playing. Connor Wegman seemed fine. All right. Couple of scores seemed fine. Now go win a rivalry game. One of those games that you can't be losing. Can't be in the business of losing. Houston needs to win that game. The 2 areas of significance I saw for the Big 12 was, 1, we've got this pseudo rivalry week thing going on. And then 2, you've got some real opportunities for national respect. We covered some of those, but the others are 2 very important games for totally different reasons. Okay. 1, how often does a Big 12 team get the opportunity to go to Autzen Stadium or just go play a road game against one of the top 5 to 10 brands in the sport? Doesn't happen often. And Oklahoma State gets that chance. Now, they are 4 touchdown underdogs. It was 27.5 the last I saw. Can check that for you. 28.5. All right. So the line has now moved toward the Ducks. 28.5 point underdogs. Oklahoma State not going to have Haas Haney, who looked really good. That's unfortunate. They're going to have to go out there with Zane Flores. I don't know what the path is to victory, but I do know that Oregon was in a dogfight with Idaho at this time last year, early in the season. So maybe you can get a sleepwalking Oregon team. I still wonder what exactly Oregon has in Dante Moore at quarterback. Maybe they're going to sleepwalk through this deal. I don't know. I don't know how much Oklahoma State is going to excite them these days. We shall see. Okay. But that is an opportunity that is very rare in the Big 12. So got to take your shots when you can. You're not going to get a bunch of shots at the Big 10 and SEC every single year. You got to start taking advantage of some of those. Now, the other one is a shot at the SEC that Arizona State will have on the road today in Starkville. This one, though, is not like a, hey, go shoot your shot, see what happens. You're 4 touchdown underdogs, let the cards fall where they may. This is, I feel like there's real pressure. There's real pressure on Arizona State. Last year, they did build a big lead against Mississippi State. They got almost 300 yards rushing from Cam Scadaboo, and then they held on for dear life and won by 7. They now have to go on the road for a night game in Starkville. Mississippi State was the worst team in the SEC last year. I'm not a big Jeff Lebby guy. That hire seemed to be pretty lauded, pretty respected. I just have never been that impressed with him. But Mississippi State is a team that I'm sure is capable of winning a night game at home against Arizona State if Arizona State is not locked in, ready to go. Now, ASU, the best of ASU, I just told you kind of the worst. Like at the beginning of the year, they had to hold on to beat Mississippi State at home. By the end of the year, they were a 4th and 13 stop away from beating Texas, who was the SEC runner-up. So wide variance there in what you can get out of Arizona State. But if they are not prepared, they could definitely lose that game. And that's one that the Big 12 cannot afford to lose. Cannot afford to lose because you know what will happen. Worst team in the SEC just beat the Big 12 champ last year and a team that's near the top 10. We can't be putting any Big 12 teams near the top 10. Don't let that happen. And, to be honest, if that were to happen, if they were to lose, it'd be hard to fight some of that stuff, man. I mean, we don't know exactly what Arizona State is going to be this year, but ASU had 79% of its production returning on both sides of the ball. So they're pretty close to what they were last year, minus 1 star player. Not a game that the Big 12 can be in the business of losing. Now, there are still other intriguing games besides that, okay? If you are an Open for Business subscriber, the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, you know about the significance on the line in Athens, Ohio today. Okay, West Virginia at 3 o'clock on ESPNU will be taking on the Ohio Bobcats. That's important because the word out of Morgantown is that there's a real chance West Virginia can get College Game Day for the backyard brawl next week if they beat Ohio. I assume that a piece of that would be Pitt taking care of business today as well. But you got to remember, if you're going to doubt this, because there are some big games next week. There are some big games. See Tennessee, Georgia, LSU. Is it LSU, Florida? I forget who LSU is playing next week. And then there is Texas A&M, Notre Dame. So there are some big games to compete with, but West Virginia's kind of got the trump card there, and that was Pat McAfee, who obviously holds some influence now, being such a big part of what's going on with College Game Day. So there's a shot there. And I know that I said, hey, this show is supposed to be kind of like the antidote to College Game Day, the antidote to Big Noon Kickoff. We're here with Big Kurt's Kickoff. But it's important. Be a great thing for the Big 12. You can go from, hey, Big Noon was in Ames, Iowa, to next week, College Game Day in Morgantown, West Virginia. That would be great. And like it or not, Pat McAfee is not really my cup of tea, but he's a huge deal to a lot of people. And if you can play right into him, and you get Pat McAfee rolling, talking about West Virginia live from Morgantown next week, it's a great thing for the conference. Great thing for the conference. So there's some significance there. And if you say, well, John, it's a game against Ohio. Like, well, West Virginia is only a 3.5 point favorite. Ohio damn near beat Rutgers at Rutgers last week. Okay. Like, Ohio is certainly capable of winning that game. West Virginia turned it over 4 times against Robert Morris last week. Rebounded fine, won easily, but got to take care of the ball. You do that against Ohio, you're going to be in some real trouble. So that could be a big missed opportunity for the league. Kent State, Texas Tech. See what's going on with the quarterback situation out there for Tech. I don't think they should have much of a problem. Best thing about that has been this is the TNT, True TV, HBO Max, the new TV partner that the Big 12 has. I'm excited to see what that broadcast looks like because I think they've done a really good job so far. I think they've done a really good job. And Mike Golick Jr. was tweeting from Spanky's in Lubbock, a place that I've been multiple times, about the fried cheese there. And I know folks in Lubbock have told me it's like almost like too touristy of a spot, basically, is kind of the vibe I've gotten there. But all right, I had to flex my Lubbock knowledge a little bit there and show that I saw him tweeting about Spanky's this week. But I think those guys seem really excited and all in about Big 12 coverage. So I'm here for that. Bowling Green, Cincinnati, Cincy. Hey, tough as nails effort against Nebraska. Definitely need to win that game. Colorado got to bounce back and win that game against Delaware. Utah, I'm sure is going to put Cal Poly in a freaking vice grip. UCF, North Carolina A&T, again, quarterback there. Interested to see what happens there with the QB injury situation. Arizona, impressive last week. They've got Weber State. Need to take care of business. And then Stanford, BYU, the Bear Bachmeier Bowl. My apologies for making it this long without touching on the Bear Bachmeier Bowl at all. One of the most interesting stories and a very, very college football 2025 story. A guy who plays spring football with Stanford. I think probably would have been starting this game for Stanford had he stayed there. Instead, now he's all of a sudden starting for BYU because of everything that happened with Jake Retzloff. So it's a lot on tap. Sounds like an awesome day, doesn't it? With that, I'm going to get ready to kick it into our first interview here. Josh Furlong is with KSL. He covers Utah. He does an excellent job. Utah, to me, was the biggest story from week one of the Big 12, in a positive sense, at least, because of the way that they just demolished UCLA, the fact that the defense looked incredible, and the fact that Devin Dampier looked like the best version of Devin Dampier that you possibly could have expected. Definitely rejuvenated Utah hopes for a Big 12 title. Definitely, to me, legitimized the fact that Utah very well could be a Big 12 championship contender in this league. I wanted to get the scoop on it with Josh Furlong from KSL. So here you go. All right, welcome back here on YouTube. John Kurtz, joined now by Josh Furlong from KSL, Utah beat writer. We're going to talk about the Utes, who were the story of the Big 12 to me, and one of the stories across the country in week one. Had about as dominant a win as you'll find over Power 4 competition. So, Josh, appreciate you joining me. Could that have possibly gone any better for Utah in week one to beat UCLA 43-10 and look as dominant as they did in doing so?
No, I'm honestly, I mean, that's the way that you want to draft it up, right? I mean, I think with what Kyle Whittingham had said about this offensive line and how effective they felt it could be, that's about as perfect as it could be, right? Like there's definitely things that you can nitpick and fine tune and adjust as the season goes on. But it wasn't one of those games where you came out and it looked like a week one, right? Like for Utah, this looked like they'd been preparing for this moment for a long time. And, there really wasn't much that UCLA could do to stop them. They just continued to move forward. That offensive line did whatever it wanted to. There was moments where I think it was a penalty or there was something else that happened. And in the past, the past 2 years, Utah would have crumbled into that situation. They didn't have the dogs to be able to do that. And it was just kind of this little blip on the radar for Utah. So, it definitely felt like one of those that they'd been preparing for a long time, and everything went as planned.
Yeah, what do you, I guess, stands out the most about the game that Devin Dampier had, which again to me was like, if you're thinking about what he could be, that looked about as good as you could have possibly expected with the way that he was able to utilize his legs, but also throwing the football. I mean, he looked like a guy that definitely has a decent arm. What stood out to you the most about his performance?
Yeah, I think with him, it's really just kind of settling in the Big 12, right? And obviously, he's going up against a Big 10 defense, and that defense still has a lot of struggles for UCLA that they need to work through.
Yeah.
But I think what he did is just really kind of put together this complete picture for this offense that they've been kind of painting this whole offseason. They knew that they needed to get better. It didn't have to be a dual threat quarterback, but the fact that they got him, that they got him with his offensive coordinator to come over, that helps a ton. And so I think for him, that was a great showing for him just to be able to kind of introduce himself to the world because quite honestly, not a lot of people are going to see him at New Mexico. No fault to his own or to New Mexico, but it's just a different stage, right? Being on Fox, going up against a Big Ten opponent, being able to have that opportunity. And I think, there's things about his game where there's moments where, he needed to slide or he needed to just kind of do a little bit different things to be able to make sure that he didn't put himself in bodily harm. But I think that's the type of player that he's going to be, right? If you're going to have a guy that's a true dual threat guy, he's going to take some of those unsavory hits that you don't want to take. And so for him, I think it's just progressing, learning when to take those, learning how to connect his ability on the field with what Utah needs from him. Before the season, just looking at kind of the trajectory of stuff, I kind of said that if he could follow that trajectory of Jaden Daniels when he went from Arizona State to LSU, and if you can follow that, I'm not saying he's a Heisman contender, and obviously he's getting a lot of love right now this week. But I think if you can follow that kind of trajectory of improving your passing, still being able to utilize your running, there's a lot to like about this Utah team, especially with Devin Dampier under center. So I think there's still a lot more to see from him, but at the same time, it kind of shows that anything Utah wants, it feels obtainable. And I think more than anything, based on how the last few years have gone for Utah, that alone is a good thing for this program.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the durability. I mean, I did see some conversation about that 10 design quarterback runs, I believe, in that game against UCLA. I know that there's got to be a lot of scars from the Cam Rising injury saga the last couple of years for Utah fans and maybe the coaching staff. Like, how much do you think they can survive doing that throughout the rest of the year? Do they have to call the game a little bit differently?
I think it's just learning to when to take your shots, right? Like I think it's not just pulling the ball just to pull the ball. I think they're definitely going to continue to utilize his strengths and have designed runs, but it's learning when the time to, tuck and run versus check down, versus, throw it away. And I think they're getting there, right? And I think he's improved upon that. But at the same time, there was one play made, in that UCLA game. I think it was in the third quarter, if I remember right. Utah was backed up into the 20-ish yard line, and UCLA finally broke through. They got through the line. They bull rushed him. Were able to get to him, and he scrambles out of it and runs, 40 yards to get 2 yards. And so I think you can't take away that kind of ability. And so I know the scars are going to be there for Utah fans, but I think you can't put them in a box, right? You can't take somebody and say, okay, sorry, you're not going to run. Arizona tried that with Noah Fafita a year ago. It didn't work, right? Like you've got to let the guy have his skill set available to him, if not just to make him comfortable. If he can feel comfortable, then I think you're going to be okay. And it's just learning that balance. And I think Devin's getting there. And I think he's learning to play differently with the line that he has and kind of what's given to him. So it's evolving, but I think, it's going to be a situation that Utah fans should be optimistic about, even if it does cause some heartburn at times.
I was surprised to see, not following Utah on a daily basis, the trio of Smith Snowden, Lander Barton, Jackson Benny all playing both ways. And, Big 12 fans obviously saw that done at the highest of levels last year with Travis Hunter. But man, I tell you what, like Smith Snowden looked like about the best skill position player that Utah had at times throughout the game. Where did this come from? Like how did this come to Kyle Whittingham? Is it a move out of necessity because of the receiver room in some cases, or like how did this come about that you'd be playing guys both ways?
Yeah, I think this is Utah looking at guys that can just make an impact, right? I think they're trying to find guys that can do whatever they can to move the ball. And I know right now it's a big indictment on Utah's wide receiver game, not being able to have that. But I think it's really just trying to find whatever the best talent is out there. And both of these guys, or at least Smith Snowden and Jackson, or Lander Barton, excuse me, they had played offense in high school, and so it's not like unfamiliar territory to them. But at the same time, the level that they played was a little bit surprising to me, especially Smith Snowden. But at the same time, if you've got the hot hand, go for it, right? And I think that's kind of what they felt. They dialed it up that way. They felt like he could kind of get, in these groupings that would help. And so Kyle Whittingham talked about it on Monday. He said, "Look, we need to get their main wide receiver Tobias Merriweather more of the ball, but at the same time, it's going to be earned and not given." And I think right now, guys like Smith Snowden who are showing up, Lander Barton, Jackson Benny, even if it's a defensive player, they're showing up. And I don't know that that should necessarily cause some concern for people. It's more just go with the hot hand, and as long as it works and as long not putting your defense at risk, then you'll be okay. So it's a really kind of fascinating dynamic right now that I'm curious to see how it develops. Kyle Whittingham has utilized a two-way player before in Sione Vaki. That was more out of necessity. So we'll see. It's easy to say that there's no concerns right now in week one, but at the same time, you've got to be able to see more of that wide receiver game, the tight ends, which the tight ends actually they lived up to their billing, but you've got to be able to see more of those wide receivers to really truly believe that this isn't out of necessity and just kind of going with the hot hand type situation.
Yeah. Where are you at on this defense through, obviously, I know you've only seen them 1 week, but high expectations as per usual, really, with the Utah defense? Like, how do they seem to stack up to what you typically get out of Morgan Scalley and Kyle Whittingham?
Yeah, it's pretty close. It's not quite to the elite level that they've been at in years past, but it's not terrible either. I mean, they held UCLA under 300 yards total. So it's they're going to look at stats like that. They got in the backfield, I think 4 or 5 times they got sacks, and so they created havoc plays. There were blown assignments, right? There was missed tackles. There was guys out of position at times. Part of that is just the nature of the game. Some of that is Nico Imaliava just kind of being, equally talented on his side of the ball. But I think on the defensive side, as a whole, you have to be happy about it, especially with some of the younger faces that you have in the defensive tackle room. But there's still more that you can see from this group. You know that you can be better, and if you're already hitting at that level against a Big Ten team, and I get it, like this isn't Ohio State or Oregon at the Big Ten, right? Like it's a completely different level. But the fact that you can do that in game one shows that they're at least at a good level. And if they can continue to make those improvements, I think Utah feels really good about themselves. It's not really one to doubt Kyle Whittingham or Morgan Scalley's defense. It's more just a matter of learning how they're going to adapt and adjust in the game and the season. So I think that's kind of where we're at right now. This week, you're not going to learn a lot with an FCS opponent, or at least you probably shouldn't. But I think, as it continues to develop, I think Morgan Scalley really dials in and gets these guys better.
Yeah, I will warn you, Josh, as somebody who was in Manhattan, Kansas last Saturday, sometimes you do learn things about teams against FCS opponents. You got to be a little bit careful with that. Okay, on Kyle Whittingham, like watching this game, I kind of thought, like, man, this, for anybody who thought like Kyle Whittingham was just sort of like fading out at this point in his career, like to go win the way that they did and do it, playing guys both ways, it seemed like a lot of creativity. Devin Dampier looking as good as he did. Felt like, man, all right, Kyle Whittingham seems like he's still pretty locked in here. Like what's the pulse on, with a successor already named, like how much longer people feel like he's going to be around?
Yeah, the fire's definitely burning for Kyle, right? Like I think once he committed himself to coming back, there was no looking back. That's the type of mentality that he has. I mean, this is a guy that I don't even know what the record's up to now, but he has continuous day streaks of going to the gym or doing something at the gym, and it's at more than a decade long. That's kind of how he locks in. So I think that once he realized that he wanted to come back, he was all set. And so you're getting a huge buy-in from him. He's energized. He's ready to go. It helps that Utah won their first game against a big opponent that they wanted to win. And so you're seeing this kind of revitalization with him. Not that last year, he was down or anything. It was more just you can see him at the end of his career, right? Like you can see that it's coming. I think anybody would expect this year to be kind of the farewell tour, quote unquote. I think it's just him really just kind of living it up and enjoying the moment. And so I think there's not any hesitations with him and what he's doing. He's not going to second guess himself. If they suddenly go on a losing streak, I think it would not be the outing that he would like. But this is a guy that once he's locked in, he's all in. So until we get to December and he has to make a decision, I think there's not really a question in his mind, and he kind of gets frustrated that people even ask the question at this point, because to him, there shouldn't be any question that he's locked in.
Yeah. Well, what's it like, the vibe just with the the holy war right now. I mean, BYU, a lot of excitement. Bear Bachmeier and how they played, I know, against Portland State, but in week one, like, what's the feeling of how significant that game peeking ahead could be when it comes about?
Yeah, that game's, always lurking for both of these fan bases. And, this weekend, each fan base had to tout their own individual strengths. I mean, scoring 69 points on an FCS opponent and the defense looking as good as they did. Obviously, that's going to, be a great honor for BYU. And those fans, love to share that. Utah fans love to share that they beat up on a Big Ten team, and they recognize that it's UCLA and not at the top. But it's just kind of this fun banter that they have back and forth. And I think it'll be really fascinating to see BYU when they actually get somebody that's a little bit more of a challenge. I think the rivalry tone will take on a different meaning once there's been some meaningful games played. But right now, it's both trying to discredit each other, right? Trying to say, okay, UCLA's dog meat, that kind of stuff. And so it's fun. But I think if both of these teams can be competitive, like, right, Utah is 25, BYU is 26 unofficially in the AP poll. If both of these teams are in that ranking, that means a ton for this game. And I think there's a real likelihood that both of these teams could be ranked coming into that game. And, the fireworks that are always there are going to be only magnified, knowing that you've got something a little bit more playing on the line when you have two teams that are actually in contention for a Big 12 title.
Yeah, no doubt. Looking forward to that one. Josh, appreciate it as always. Thanks for sharing your insight. We'll do it again soon. All right. Josh Furlong, appreciate his time. Make sure I throw the outline back up here for you. BYU and Utah fans going after it a little bit? Is that really a thing that happens? I've only seen a little bit of that in the comments here so far. Starter 179. Sorry, I'm seeing this. That was a pre-taped interview. But yeah, that's going to be an awesome freaking game, man. Who's not jacked up for Texas Tech, Utah, based on what we've seen from them so far? Texas Tech totally looked the part. I know it was Arkansas Pine Bluff, but look like they've got dudes running around everywhere. Utah just suffocated UCLA, looked amazing, put the clamps down on Nico Iamaleava. Devin Dampier looked great. I am here for that. Kim, we'll know everything we need to know about Utah in 2 weeks. We will definitely know a lot more. We'll know a lot more about both of those teams in 2 weeks, for sure. Okay. We're going to move on to the next interview that I have for you here. Got to make sure that I time all this out correctly for you. But thank you, first of all, everybody who is here. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. If you are here, if you're on Twitter, would mean a ton for me if you can do one of two things. Just go to YouTube, search John Kurtz, like the video, subscribe to the channel, or subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com. You can join 5,100 plus other Big 12 fans who do. I've got 2 more interviews coming up for you. We're going to talk some KU-Mizzou at the end, the game that I am most excited for today. But how can you not be a little bit romantic about Cy-Hawk? Okay. So Spencer Hall maybe calls it El Asico, which is very funny. El Clasico, obviously, the classic soccer rivalry. But the El Asico moniker for Iowa State, I feel like is dead and buried. That's long gone. That was back when Iowa State was not as consistently good as they are right now, and looks to me to be, at this moment in time, the better program of the two, at least with what happened last year and how they're playing this year. Very interesting, the dynamics at play there in the state of Iowa, because I know this, and maybe K-State fans will get upset with me for saying this, but I know this as a K-State fan and what the K-State-KU rivalry has typically been over the years. Kansas is the big med school. K-State is the ag school. The big brother, little brother dynamic. Certainly Kansas would look down on K-State. I feel like it's been the same with Iowa State, right? Kind of the same deal. Iowa's the big, they've got the med school. They've got the hospital there. Iowa State, the ag school. Little brother vibes, but man, little brother has grown up these days. And Iowa State, to me, I understand why the spread on this game would be close. I understand why it's only Iowa State minus 3.5. I do get that, because the last 10 of the last 11 have been decided by 10 points or less. It's always a close game, and the road team has won 5 straight in this. Matt Campbell has never beaten Iowa at home. I understand all of that. Okay, I do. But if you're just looking at what these teams are right now, this feels like Iowa State by 2 touchdowns, especially playing at home. We'll see. We're going to get the scoop from Alec Bussey. He covers Iowa State for 24/7 Sports. He does an awesome job there. I'm sorry, the super chats, guys. Browns and beers. I promise I will get to your super chat. I'm realizing that right now, and I see Kim just popping in there. But Alec Bussey does a great job covering Iowa State, and I wanted to chat with him about Cy-Hawk, what this is all going to look like today, which will kick things off. I mean, we're literally about 45, 50 minutes away from Cy-Hawk. So without further ado, here's Alec, who covers Iowa State. We're going to talk a little Cy-Hawk, good old rivalry weekend, basically, in the Big 12 with 4 regional or in-state rivalries going on. But Cy-Hawk soaking up a lot of the spotlight, especially with the way Iowa State's playing right now. So, Alec, appreciate you joining me. You can find him. He covers Iowa State for 24/7 Sports, also on KXNO Radio in the mornings, bright and early. But, man, could you have drawn up a better start to the season for Iowa State after beating K-State in Ireland and then taking care of South Dakota last week?
No, I think the only way it gets better is if they find a way to beat Iowa here on Saturday and they're able to start 3-0 with 2 rivalry game victories within their first 3 games. So it's certainly been an exciting start for Iowa State, especially when you consider the fact that they're coming off of an 11-win season a year ago, likely the best season in program history. So things are certainly continuing to trend positively for Iowa State. And if they beat Iowa on Saturday, will continue to shoot upward for them.
Well, somebody who witnessed what happened in Manhattan on Saturday, my next question is, how in the hell did Iowa State recoup from Ireland to beat a better FCS team 55-7 instead of needing a last-second drive there? Like, how impressive was it, I guess, the way that they handled the turnaround there?
Yeah, it's something that Matt Campbell spoke a ton about leading up to the season. Was he almost seemed more concerned for the return trip home and being able to play well right after playing in Ireland than he did the travel to Ireland and playing well overseas. He talked a lot about, the investment that they put into sports medicine research, research into like sleep patterns. They had a sleep specialist and their health and nutrition staff and strength staff. All those people work together really closely. They worked well with sleep specialists to try and get guys on the right schedules. They strategically traveled when they did because it helped maximize their sleep schedule and helped maximize guys' ability to recover and kind of not experience too much jet lag. I think all of those things together helped Iowa State play well. And I mean, every coach says like the 1-0 thing, be the best version of yourself every day. I do think that the players here at Iowa State are really invested in that. And I think you kind of saw that kind of take shape here in week 1 when they jumped on South Dakota early, right? Like they were up 27-7 at halftime. They end up winning the game 55-7 at the end. And, the only time South Dakota was really able to effectively move the ball was their scripted drive to open the game. So all things considered, it was handled really well, really professionally by Iowa State. I think is the word that Matt Campbell would most consistently use. Is it was just a professional approach.
That's a good word, man. Professional, tough, like all the kind of traits that you would maybe expect from a Matt Campbell program. You see it in this team. What is like the pulse of where the state is at right now? I'm always curious of this as kind of an outsider with where the rivalry's at, because I mean, I think historically, at least I think of Iowa being the dominant force in the rivalry, but like, I mean, Iowa State's been the better program the last couple of years. Like, where are the dynamics at right now between these 2 rivals?
Yeah, Iowa definitely still has a stronger grasp on the entire state. It has a bigger fan base. I think part of that just goes back to, the historic success of the program. One thing that I think really changed maybe where fans align, and this is kind of like really inside baseball, and I don't know what year it was, but Hayden Fry added that ANF sticker on the Iowa helmets for America Needs Farmers. And despite Iowa not being like the ag school in the state, that's actually what Iowa State is. Iowa is more focused on the business. They have a strong medical program, obviously a lot of people are familiar with. That led to a lot of the agricultural farming families in the state to identify more with Iowa than they did Iowa State. It happened a long time ago, but that gets passed down generation to generation. And like you being in Kansas, I know that you have the Royals and you have the Chiefs, but they're technically in Missouri, right? A lot of people identify with them in Kansas. Iowa's a little bit further on the spectrum of there's no pro sports here. So people are more and more invested in their college teams than they would be in a lot of other states in the Midwest. It's more like the South, right? Where there's not professional teams in every state. But Iowa definitely still has more of a grasp on it. But I do think you make a good point about how Iowa State's success, particularly last year, the way that they won in 2024, I think caught a lot of people's attention. I think that the success of the program over the last decade is something that has caught a lot of people's attention. I think there's more and more people who are open to being Cyclone fans if they don't have a strong connection to either university via family or their own personal attending of either university. And I think a lot of that is due to the success that Matt Campbell has had at Iowa State. I mean, he talked this week in his weekly press conference about how they had to catch up to Iowa, like consistently as a program. Like Iowa was a way better program than Iowa State was when Matt Campbell arrived 10 years ago. And I appreciated Campbell's honesty. It was just like, we had to get better. We had to invest more. We had to catch up to them on a consistent basis. And I think post 2022, where they missed a bowl game, and went 4-8. They've rebounded really well in 2023. They lost to Iowa at Jack Trice Stadium, but they won last year in dramatic fashion. And they are a small betting favorite entering Saturday's game at Jack Trice. I think 3 to 3.5 points, depending on the book that you look at. So there is an investment from each fan base. I think Iowa still has a smaller majority there compared to Iowa State, but there are people who have started to pay more attention, I think, to the Iowa State side of things in the state.
So that's the weird part to me. I mean, you mentioned 3.5 point favorite. I'm like, if I look at this game on paper, like Kamari Moulton is not playing for Iowa, right? I mean, Mark Gradowski completed 4 passes last week, after this whole offseason hubbub about how much better they were going to be at quarterback. I've obviously seen Iowa State play very, very closely with the game against K-State and what they did against South Dakota. It seems to me like Iowa State should be a heavier favorite, but there is this whole deal of Iowa winning in Jack Trice, right? You got 6 straight. Matt Campbell's never beaten them at home. Let's start there. Like, what's the deal with this hex that Iowa has over Iowa State in Jack Trice when all these games played have been really close? Honestly, reminds me a little bit of what the K-State Iowa State series was like for a while there before Iowa State turned the tide and started actually winning some of those close games.
The road teams have done well in this series in general. I think over the last 7 years, the road team has won every single game. Obviously, that 2020 year, the 2 teams didn't play because of COVID. The Big Ten played a league-only schedule that year and started later than the Big 12 did. So that kind of prevented the game from being played. But it is generally a very close series. If you go back and look at the series history, I think you have to go back to 2005 to see the last time that Iowa State beat Iowa by more than a field goal. That puts into perspective how close these teams generally are. I think if you go back to 2011, 2012, 9 of the games since that time frame have been decided by 1 score or less. So that just is another example of how close of a game these 2 schools play each year. Even last year, right? Iowa State ends up winning 11 games in the regular, or 10 games in the regular season, 11 games overall. Has some really impressive wins. Obviously, the win over Miami is the most impressive one in the postseason. But it took kind of a miracle for them to beat Iowa, right? Iowa's defense was highly respected last year. They had 2 big completions from Rocco Becht on that last possession, one to Jalen Noel, one to Ben Bramer. It took Iowa State capitalizing off of Iowa mistakes. It took 2 goal line stands from Iowa State to prevent Iowa from getting in the end zone. If any of those things don't happen, I don't know if Iowa State wins in Kinnick. This year, it's flipped a little bit where I think Iowa State enters. They had more preseason hype than Iowa did because of what they returned. Iowa had more question marks. They don't return nearly as much production as Iowa State does. And they didn't have as good of a year ago. The game is in Ames, which I think is something favorable for Iowa State, even though the road team has had more success in the series. I do think you combine all of those factors, and it's just it's hard to predict this series because they play so many close games. And I honestly really like your comparison for Farmageddon. I think it's almost the inverse, right? Where Iowa State is kind of fighting uphill, I guess, in a certain sense with Cyhawk, where Iowa has had more success over the last, 5 to 7 years, 10 years in the rivalry. Whereas in Farmageddon, Iowa State has now started to control it a little bit more, winning 5 of 6 or 4 or 5, whatever it specifically is. And K-State's kind of fighting uphill. I would just view it as the inverse on which side of the coin Iowa State lands on.
What do you think, from a matchup standpoint, what should concern Iowa State here? What are the things that stand out to you the most?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that would really concern me if I was an Iowa State fan is probably just a line of scrimmage, perhaps on each side of the ball. Start with Iowa State on defense. Their defensive line has probably one of the Big 12's best players in Dominique Orange. He looks like a top 50 type of NFL draft pick right now, at least in my estimation. I know I've read that from a few people. He ranked highly in a lot of like the early season NFL draft stuff. I think Dave Brugler had him as like a top 5 interior defensive lineman. But they don't have a lot of other proven production, a lot of proven Big 12 players other than Orange and Ikenna Ezeagu on the defensive line. That's concerning me because Iowa has 2 potential Americans on its offensive line. Senator Logan Jones is one of them. So that's a good head-to-head matchup with Orange on the interior. And then on the right side of Iowa's offensive line, they have Jenny Stunker, who's also an All-American type of candidate. I think that's concerning because, Iowa State's not a team that generates a ton of pressure. They were last in the Big 12 in sacks last season at just 16. But you probably want to be able to generate some sort of pressure to continue making Mark Gronowski uncomfortable, speed him up, make his feet move quickly. That's something that he kind of talked about struggling with against Albany in week 1. Another area of concern for me on the other side of it is Iowa's defensive line maybe doesn't have the superstars that it's had in the past when you think of someone like AJ Epinesa, for example, but it's really deep and it's got a lot of productive playmakers. Ethan Hurkett, Aaron Graves, those 2 guys combined, I think last year for 12 and a half sacks. They're both back. Max Llewellyn is another productive pass rusher. He's back. They have a 5-star in Yosei Epinesa. I don't know how much he'll play this weekend or even how much he'll play this season for Iowa, but he's someone who, you're a 5-star prospect, you're a 5-star talent. Like that's someone who can typically get on the field in specific packages, rush packages, and stress opposing offensive lines just with their size, skill, talent combination. That D-line is deep. And Iowa State's offensive line has played well, particularly second half on this season of the K-State game. Like they struggled in the first half of that. I think they were a little caught off guard with the 4-man defensive front that K-State ran. But since coming out of halftime of that week 0 game, they've played well. I think you could argue that Iowa has an advantage on both lines of scrimmage there, but Iowa State's skill talent is much better, in my opinion, especially quarterback, receiver, tight end, which is kind of unique to say because we think of Iowa as one of tight end U's up there with like Notre Dame, for example. But yeah, I mean, it comes down to it stresses for Iowa State, I would say, are the line of scrimmage, but I don't think that Iowa State's offensive line should be overwhelmed, at least at either of the tackle positions, which I think is something that should inspire some confidence for Cyclone fans.
To touch on Farmageddon before I let you go, good clip that you had with Jamie Pollard the other day, Iowa State athletic director, talking about the reasoning behind why it's not happening and being more like hey, what's going to be fair? If we're going to protect 2 rivalries for one school, what does that mean for everybody else? Well, what did you make of the explanation there? And does that seem to be satisfying anybody?
Yeah, I don't know how, to me, you hear him say some of the things. I feel like he kind of contradicts himself a little bit, where he says K-State can't have 2 protected rivals, or some schools can't have some protected rivals and others can't have protected games that already exist in the Big 12. I don't understand what the additional headache is there. I guess in my opinion, he did mention, and I appreciate him saying this on the air with us, that they could schedule the game as a non-conference game in 2027, the year that the series is set to conclude. But he did kind of question, or at least put out there, like, how would Matt Campbell feel about playing 11 non-conference or 11 power conference games? Obviously the 9 Big 12 games, Iowa's on the schedule in 2027. And then you add in K-State and replace one of the G5 games with the FCS opponent on Iowa State's schedule. I think that's a fair question. I would just say this, that I don't know, even though K-State's a program that's been better in the Big 12, right? Like they've won 8 games under Chris Klieman every year. From a talent perspective, like how much different is playing K-State than playing UCF or whoever was like the replacement level team? Like, I don't think it's that much different. Like, I don't know if the schedule gets that much easier, that much harder, whether or not K-State's on the schedule. I think it's a shame that the 2 schools aren't scheduled to play in 2027. The more and more I've been introduced to this rivalry, and I've had the pleasure of seeing each side of it, having covered K-State as well. It's a fun rivalry. It's one that gets a lot of attention in the Big 12. And my line throughout the last couple of weeks since this is blown up is, if the schools want it to be played in 2027, they can make it be played in 2027. Like, are there sacrifices that are going to have to be made? Are you going to have to potentially play a more challenging schedule? Absolutely. But if you want to play that year, you can. It just has to come down to whether or not they want to make that decision. And I also appreciate Jimmy Pollard saying that, like, in the future, the Big 12 can decide to protect this game, or the leaders in the Big 12 can make decisions to protect this game, which I think is something that they should do and something that I hope doesn't go overlooked, because I do think this series matters. And I do think that, especially in a conference that doesn't have a lot of natural rivalries anymore, this is one that should be celebrated.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point about the non-con thing. I hadn't thought about it a ton. I mean, where you would play it, I guess, is a part of it, but I don't know. You could throw it back at Arrowhead like they did for a while back in the it was 2009, 2010. If you wanted to get a neutral site, if you're Iowa State, you don't want to concede on that. I do understand if you're Matt Campbell and you're like, listen, bro, you're making me play 2 of my 3 non-cons, not only Power 4 teams, but teams that are rivals, right? I mean, that's
and early in the season. I don't know if he's particularly loved that it was 2 of their first 3 opponents this year were rivals too. I mean, that's 2 of their 3 biggest games.
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, you look at Iowa State's schedule after this. It's kind of a letdown for a little while.
Yeah.
I mean, which is not the worst thing in the world, I guess. But if you're just talking about excitement from a fan standpoint, to go from beating K-State in Ireland and then potentially beating, if you beat Iowa at home for the first time in the Matt Campbell era, like, rest of the season is going to be a little bit of a drag compared to that.
I guess I would ask you to, and this is something that Pollard said on the air with us this week, is that one thing that Iowa State fans often talk about is, you know, Iowa hasn't played Penn State, or they don't play Ohio State, or maybe they haven't played whatever school that was in the Big Ten East for all those years very often. And how Iowa State fans point that out, and how maybe if they had the protected game, it would take longer to like cycle through Big 12 opponents. I don't personally see that like feeling from the fan base. Like, I think that a majority of them would rather play K-State than go play whatever rotate onto the schedule year that they don't play in 2027. But that's just my thought. Like, where do K-State fans fall on that? Like, do they want 2 protected games, or are they open to that? Would they rather have the hypothetically easier schedule, assuming the 2 schools stay at the level that they're at?
I think people want the game. Like, I've heard it, and if you look at K-State's 27 schedule, like, it's not that fun. Like, I mean, you just look at it and you're like, you know, I mean, Kansas is still on there, thankfully, but you've lost Missouri, Nebraska, and then would be losing Iowa State, you know, all these teams that you played forever over the years. I think people would rather have it. Now, I guess maybe if everyone continues to be concerned about winning the game, maybe that becomes a bigger deal. But no, I think people would rather cling to having games that are meaningful, because there are less and less of them in college football, which, you know, I think with like Kansas-Mizzou playing this weekend too, it just emphasizes that. Like, it's so stupid that game has not been played. That was the second oldest rivalry in college football, second most played rivalry in college football when it went away in 2011. So,
well, and like I said to friends today about this, like, I'm amped up for that game. Like, I'm excited to follow it. I grew up close to St. Louis, like, didn't grow up a Mizzou fan, but, you know, paid closer attention because it was a regional thing. Like, I'm fired up for that game to be back, and I want to be able to watch some of it. And I think the phrase I used was like, I'm happy that the hurt feelings are finally gone and those 2 schools are playing. Like, to me, like, that's my opinion on this. Like, realignment has led to games like Bedlam not being played, or Texas A&M for 15 years until they rejoined up in the SEC. But like, those schools are choosing not to play, or chose not to play. Like, if they want to play, they can play. Like, Oregon and Oregon State are playing. Washington and Washington State are playing. Like, that's my perspective on it. Like, yeah, it's a headache, and it's frustrating that it's a non-conference game. And if you're the school like Oklahoma State, who it's not your fault that it's not being played, it's OU's fault. But like, what do your fans want? Like, they would rather play OU, I would imagine, than play Arkansas Pine Bluff.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, somebody has to kind of be the bigger man there. I think that's really what you're saying, which sucks. And it's not a position anybody should be put in. And it's, you know, you can blame the suits at Fox and ESPN, basically, who realigned all of this to the point where these are the decisions that have to be made. But like, the problem with college football has always been, there's nobody making decisions for the greater good of the game. So at some point, like, somebody needs to make those decisions. And I think what you're saying here is like, that kind of falls in the lap of, Oklahoma State or Jamie Pollard and Gene Taylor, whoever it's going to be. You got to be the one to do that, to kind of save whatever's left of that in college football that you can. So
that's my thought on it. I mean, and I get like, that's a big pride pill for Oklahoma State to swallow. Like, I wouldn't want to do that if I was Oklahoma State's AD and leadership, but I can imagine like selling tickets is a hell of a lot easier too. Like I was
Oh,
saying
yeah.
that to someone in the office, like Iowa State only has Cyhawk scheduled out through 2027. Like to me, selling season ticket packages would be at least a little bit more challenging if you don't have Cyhawk on the schedule every other year. You don't have K-State on the schedule every other year. Like that makes it harder to sell tickets.
Yeah.
And that matters.
Yeah. No doubt. No doubt, man. Well, good discussion. Alec, I appreciate the time. And hopefully we'll do it again soon, my friend.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. It's always fun.
All right. There is Alec Bussey. Appreciate his time here on what we're affectionately calling Big Kurt Saturday. Big Kurt Saturday. All right. I don't know why I put that back up. I'm going to have to go straight into another interview here. I did. Thank you to those in the chat who alerted me to College Game Day actually spending some time on KU-Mizzou. I got to watch a little bit of that. Of course, Nick Saban had to slobber all over Bo Perbula of Kansas. We got our boy Desmond Howard, noted Big 12 fan Desmond Howard, sticking up for Jalen Daniels and the Kansas Jayhawks. But if you had any doubt how fired up I am for this game, look, I'm a K-State guy, all right? But I've said a couple times this week, I grew up in Kansas City. I know all about the KU-Mizzou rivalry, just how bitter and hate-filled it is. Tons of hate. When you have a rivalry that's based in the Civil War, you're going to get a lot of hatred there, okay? And it needs to be played every single year. It is a crime against humanity that it's not played every single year. And if there's one guy who knows all about this, it is my next guest, who is Kevin Flaherty. He is with KC Sports Network right now, fellow KCSN host. He does a great job with the Kansas podcast with Nick Springer there. But, I mean, he's covered college football for a long time. He's covered Kansas for a long time. And he knows this rivalry about as intimately as anybody. So I'm fired up to let you get to hear from my guy, Kevin Flaherty, on KU-Mizzou today. All right, welcome back here on the channel. John Kurtz, joined now by Kevin Flaherty from KC Sports Network, a guy who's covered Kansas for a very long time, and really excited to get his perspective on a game that it's just about damn time this thing is being played. We're 14 years past the last time Kansas and Missouri played in football. And, you know, as someone who grew up in Kansas City as a K-State fan, but, I mean, I have an immense appreciation for this rivalry. It was amazing, especially my last waning memories of it, you know, or the games that were played at Arrowhead, which the three, at least the first three, were incredible. So let me phrase it to you like this, Kevin. Like, how necessary is it that this game be played? I mean, I love this for college football.
Yeah, I've described the rivalry as toxic, and I think it is pretty toxic when you look at the background of it, the way I think fans can kind of lose the best portions of themselves. But ultimately, this is one of the things that makes college football so great. Our rivalries like this, where you have that hatred, where you have somebody, they'll be in a bar and they'll say, I don't care if we go 1-11 this year, as long as the one win is over, you know, such and such. And I think in this case in particular, it was really unfortunate the way that things went down with Missouri leaving the conference and the rivalry just kind of dying a silent and immediate death the way that it did. And so to see it brought back, I'm really excited for the game portion of it. I thought it was really interesting. We had David Lawrence on our show who provides color commentary for KU, and he played under Don Fambro, the sort of famous / infamous KU coach, Missouri hater, depending on which angle you're looking at it from. And one of the things that he said was he would have been very happy to see the rivalry continued. And so somebody who has that much dislike, at least for the other side, would have been happy to see it come back. Then I guess it's definitely time for it to be back.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I mean, look, part of the reason that it's so enticing is because these programs have been so much better the last few years, right? I mean, that's the thing that's a shame about it, is think about the matchups that we could have had over the last few years, you know, certainly since Lance Leipold got to town in Lawrence, and that's continued over into this year. I mean, I'm not sure that you could have designed too much better of a start for Kansas. I guess maybe injury issues aside, blowout wins over Fresno and Wagner. The new stadium looks great. Jalen Daniels has been playing well. I mean, this looks, at least to me from watching the Fresno game, a lot more like the Andy Kotelnicki offense of old. your thoughts on just how well things have gone so far for KU.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think one position in particular, when you look at the injuries sort of starting to mount at linebacker, is a little bit concerning, especially when you go into a game with the running threats that Missouri has. But other than that, Jalen looks like the best possible version of Jalen Daniels. And we've seen this version of Jalen, I think, some in 2002. I thought he started off that way, or 2022. Then he started off that way in 2023 before he got hurt. And I thought we saw more of it at the end of last year. John, you were there at the K-State game. I thought Jalen was terrific in that game outside of a couple mistakes and obviously the really big one at the end. And so to see this version of Jalen is probably, it would be number one with the check mark in terms of what you would hope for Kansas. The stadium has been sort of a flawless reveal. There weren't really any complaints, and that's unusual. Usually when you open something up, people get stacked up outside where they can't get in, or there are different issues, and that didn't happen. And I think even beyond that, I think they hit on a lot of the transfers that they brought in, because this was going to be a little bit of a starting over job, albeit with Jalen in that pilot seat, because you had to bring in so many transfers after such a senior-laden roster.
Yeah, I mean, so with the offense, like, is it fair? I mean, I know Jim Zabrowski, Matt Lubick, like they're guys that worked in and around Andy Kotelnicki quite a bit and have been around him a lot. Is it fair to summarize it as like this kind of looks like what that offense was under Kotelnicki?
Yeah, I think they're certainly in the same family, if not altogether the same person, right? And I think that you make a good point bringing up Matt Lubick, and that I think he was behind some of the option and quarterback run stuff that we really saw previously. If you remember in 2022 when Kansas played West Virginia, they hadn't really shown a lot of option. They go into Morgantown, beat West Virginia in overtime, and part of that, West Virginia's DC after the game was like, look, like they didn't show any of this for us to know that we had to prepare for that. And I think what Kansas has shown so far has kind of been a starter kit for what the offense I think will be once Kansas gets into the Missouri game. Once they start getting further into the schedule, I do expect to see more of the things that we saw under Kotelnicki in terms of variance with the option game, with the quarterback run game, all the different motions, a wide receiver becoming a pitch back because of whatever happened. And quite frankly, it wouldn't even surprise me to see some of the trick play type stuff with multiple quarterbacks and things of that nature once they really get into it.
Yeah, how do you think this offense matches up with the Mizzou defense? I know you mentioned a little bit linebacker concerns on the other side of the ball for Kansas. What about when KU has the ball? What do you see in that matchup?
Well, Missouri's front is legitimate. I mean, it's maybe the best front that Kansas is going to face all year. And I say that really liking K-State's front and some of the other defensive lines that they're going to face. I think the thing that makes it interesting for Kansas is Jalen Daniels is really, really difficult to sack. And when you watch the West Virginia game last year, when you watch the K-State game from last year, K-State was able to get really consistent pressure on Jalen Daniels, was only able to sack him once. And so I do think that even if Kansas is getting beat up front from a pass rush standpoint, Jalen's a guy that can make you right in some ways in terms of eluding that rush and making some plays, and that really helps. I don't think this is going to be the sort of game where Kansas is just going to line up, run wide zone right at Missouri and look up and they have 250 yards. I think running the ball is going to be really important, but I think they're going to get there. And that's part of the reason I like your point about Kotelnicki is I think they're going to get there in a similar way. And if you look back at the way that Kansas attacked Illinois when they had, Terzon Newton and all of those guys in 2023, they made those defensive linemen move side to side and made it to where they weren't able to get the push up front and made them lean left and then went right. And so I would expect a lot of misdirection and different things that will allow Kansas to sort of tap into the running game.
I was really interested to read some of the quotes from both head coaches in this game about trying to emphasize the history of the rivalry. But I guess at the same time, you probably don't want to overload too much with that. Like, what do you make of the approaches that we saw from each side in terms of trying to educate a bunch of guys who the last time this game was played were probably not even in kindergarten, a lot of them at that point? Like, how much you want to try and trickle that into what's going to be baked into this game.
Yeah, I think Lance Leipold put it perfectly when he said that they want the players energetic but not emotional. And I think that that's one of the tricks when you have a rivalry game like this is you can see those giant momentum swings back and forth. And at the end of the day, they have to play a football game. They have to go out and execute, and being angry at the other side because of what happened 150 years ago, just isn't productive. And so I think that both coaches sort of seem to have the right feel. Obviously, both coaches have been tested in big games and rivalry games, although not the Kansas-Missouri rivalry game specifically. And so I'm interested to see how exactly that does play out, because typically it does feel like there is a little bit of a harder edge between the two teams when this game is played. You do see some unnecessary roughness penalties. You do see some different things that maybe you don't see as much in other games.
What's the best KU-Mizzou rivalry story you have? I'll put you on the spot a little bit.
Gosh. My personal favorite is probably, and rivalry stories, John, they can be apocryphal. And so, it grows year after year after year. But one that Don Fambro used to tell was basically, I think it was Pepper Rogers was coaching KU, and they were going to Missouri, and Midwest weather, a blizzard came out of nowhere basically, and Kansas wasn't prepared for it. And they sent a note over to Missouri and said, hey, we left all our long johns back at home. Like, can you guys help us out? And the note they got back basically said, we hope you guys freeze to death. And so the coach says to Fambro, says, I don't know what we have to do, but figure it out, basically. And so the answer allegedly was to take the heated Kansas bus, ram it through Missouri's fence at their stadium, and park it on KU's sideline, where the players would basically be heated on the bus, trot off the bus to go play, and then as soon as they were done, go back onto the heated fence. And so I love that story because of the different layers. Obviously, you have the hatred aspect of it, but you have the do whatever it takes to get this thing done. And so whether I can find grainy footage of a bus on the sideline or not, that's probably my favorite story that I've heard about the rivalry.
That's a good one, man. I haven't heard that one. I feel like I know a lot of the lore between the two, but I had not heard that one. Branching out from the game specifically a little bit, the $300 million gift from David Booth, like what? First of all, how do you think specifically it's going to be used, and just how do you kind of outline the significance of it overall? I mean, it's easy to see that number and be like, okay, $300 million, that's a lot. We're living in an age of Cody Campbell, right, in the Big 12. But specifically, like what is that going to mean, and where will it go?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that they said that only 75 is going toward the stadium project. And so the other 225, as I understand it, is almost, as weird as it sounds, like a rainy day fund, just sort of like, hey, we have to get NIL up a little bit, maybe a couple million here. Okay, we have this fund that we can do that with. Hey, we're needing to pay back these things on the entertainment district. Maybe we have some money set aside for that. And so right now it's kind of an all-purpose thing. I believe when you donate money to Notre Dame, like, you can't donate to a specific sport. They put it straight into athletics, and then it's sort of at the athletic department's discretion how they want to use it. So you can't donate for a new scoreboard or whatever specifically. And my understanding is that's kind of what this is sort of a $225 million. This is here when and if you need it for various things. And so I don't know that it has a specific purpose just yet, but I get the feeling it'll be a little bit here, a little bit there. And in the meantime, I'm sure you find a way to make that money work for you in terms of dividends and things like that, where you can use some of that to fund scholarships or different things like that basically making money off the money sitting there in the bank.
Yeah, I guess, my take on it was kind of like, it feels to me, I mean, obviously everyone's going to point toward revenue sharing, which, I mean, It definitely helps to be able to hit that, because that number, like, people forget, like, increases every year in addition to where it's already at the 20 million. But it feels like it'll help out a lot too with, keeping coaches around, like being able to make sure that it just eases the stress of, like, coaches, support staff, like all the extra stuff that you have to have, which if you're all these athletic departments, they're going to have to hit the 20.5 rev share number. I you're talking about maybe losing Stafford. It's already happened around the Big 12. We've seen some like longtime comm staffers get let go at places. So to me, that's where a lot of this will be very, very significant, I would think.
Yeah, and it happened to KU. The KU also had layoffs in the staff departments, several months ago. And so I do think that that's going to be part of it as well. And it's just sort of there to attack whatever need you have in that given period. But let's not forget, John, I mean, Kansas went out and tried to make probably a little bit bigger splash in the transfer portal from a basketball standpoint than they were able to. And I think that some of that was, I don't want to say they couldn't find the money, but really you were weighing donor fatigue and that you're saying, hey, we just hit up these guys for the stadium. We just hit them up for NIL for the football team. We just hit them up for all of this. And then, you're sitting there and Darren Williams reads you a price tag, or Darren Williams reads you a price tag, and it's different than maybe what you were going to hit. And so I think that there's a little bit of it in there for, obviously NIL is even going to change with the having to approve the different deals and things like that. But it does help to sort of have that in your war chest and know that that is accessible.
Yeah. Well, looking forward to this game, Kevin. I appreciate the chat as always, my friend, and we'll do it again. All right. Great editing by me. Great edit. There's Kevin Flaherty. Appreciate his time. He does great work. If you're a Kansas fan, check out his podcast on KC Sports Network. Okay, so we've got like 15 minutes or so left before the games kick off. Here's what I'm going to tell you. I've enjoyed following along with the chat. I've tried to pop in there. There's been some convo about K-State, UCF in there. I'll try and get to those. But let me know what else you want me to cover in the final 15 minutes here. I've got some injury updates for you. I am going to give you some predictions, but hit me up in the chat and let me know what it is that you want me to talk about before we finish here. If you are so inclined, you can submit a super chat by clicking the $ below the chat box if you want to support the channel. But just regular chats are fine too. I will try to address what you guys want me to hit on before we get done and I head over to my couch and we watch games all day. So looking forward to that. Browns and Beers is in Athens, Ohio today. That's awesome. Love that, Browns and Beers. That's a big one, man. Like I said, college game day potentially on the line if West Virginia can win. They are like 3.5 point favorites at Ohio, who pushed Rutgers to the brink on the road last week. That's actually a low-key, very, very intriguing game today. Thank you, Browns and Beers. Kim loves the Saturday morning show. Thank you. We're getting a decent response from this as it has gone on. So I will try to do this. Really, the only reason I can't promise to do it all the time is just because of a bandwidth thing. But I've enjoyed this as well, so I will try to do it as much as I can. Little counter programming to what's going on with college game day. Here are some injury updates for you today. K-State and Army, which is coming up tonight at 6:00 on ESPN. Dylan Edwards is going to be out for the second straight week. That according to Pete Thamel. Now, Chris Kleiman had been a little bit more optimistic this week, at least said he was running around some at practice. So that is a good sign if you're thinking like long-term for K-State here, that Dylan Edwards is hopefully close-ish. Bengali Kamara will warm up for Kansas today. That is starting linebacker. Really talented transfer from South Carolina and Pitt. KU's linebacker room has been a little bit beat up. Bo Perbula can really run. For Mizzou, you're going to need some good linebacker play. I mean, Mizzou in general has a good ground game. Bengali Kamara would be huge if he is able to go for Kansas. It'll be a game-time decision and will warm up. Baylor defensive tackle Jackie Marshall trending toward being able to play. That was the report from yesterday, which is good news. Now, I've been corrected by a friend of mine on the Kevin Jennings front, who did have almost 400 yards rushing last year, but he is not as much of a threat on the ground as I was making him out to be this week. So that is my fault. That is a swing and a miss there. But still, you worry about Baylor being able to stop anybody's ground game. And the key stat in this game, I mentioned it yesterday, but last year SMU was 2-3 when Kevin Jennings had to throw more than 30 passes, and they were an unbeaten 9-0 when he threw fewer than 30 passes. So what that tells you is if SMU can run, they're generally going to be in much better shape. Like Kevin Jennings is a good passer. He threw for over 3,000 yards last year. But if you have to rely on him to be the guy doing that all the time, it's not going to go as well. You need to have a balanced attack. That's when SMU is at its best. Uncle Neely with Colorado. All right. One of those guys that I'm sure you've all seen him. You would recognize him, very connected to the Colorado program. He was doing a show yesterday and said Juju Lewis will probably play more than Caden Salter today against Delaware, which would be very interesting. Salter, I wouldn't say that he was great against Georgia Tech, but he did make some plays. I mean, you can see the playmaking ability that he has. He is a quarterback that definitely can make plays with his legs. But I am curious to see what Juju Lewis will look like and how much that's going to continue to be a competition rolling throughout the year. Juju Lewis, 5-star freshman, Caden Salter, transfer from Liberty. So that was an interesting nugget by someone who's definitely plugged in at Colorado. Texas Tech quarterback Baron Morton expected to start today. That was the report from yesterday, which is very, very good news. Baron Morton, that was kind of a scary hit the way it happened when a guy goes low and your knee bends weird. It's never something that you want to see. I know that Joey McGuire had kind of downplayed that was going to be anything long-term, especially with that Utah game coming up. Like everybody, Big 12 fans should want Baron Morton to be healthy for that. So glad to see that. That Kent State game is coming up in just about 10 minutes. So we'll be able to see Baron Morton very quickly. And then Cam Fancher got knocked out of that UCF game last week against Jacksonville State. So Taven Jackson is expected to start today for UCF. So honestly, I mean, Taven Jackson I thought looked better from the bits that I saw of that game anyway last week for UCF. A lot of people, myself included, were surprised that Taven Jackson didn't win the job outright in the first place. But he is going to start today for UCF. One interesting thought that I have before I'm going to check the chat here and try and get to what you guys want me to cover real quick before the end. I guess I'll give you a little bit on two games here. Did everybody see the Mike Gundy back and forth this week that he had with Dan Lanning in Oregon? Because I did think if you're somebody that is like hoping that Oklahoma State is going to cover a 4-touchdown spread in that game, I don't know. Dan Lanning seemed a little bit fired up by the insinuation from Mike Gundy that they just throw out a ton of money and like that's why they're winning. Like that was kind of the deal here. I apologize. I'm not coming up with the tweet right now as I'm trying to find it. I know I tweeted about this earlier this week. It seemed like a little bit of a misunderstanding. Like Mike Gundy said, yeah, here we go. Let's see. I don't know if this is going to, sometimes the Twitter video doesn't really play very loudly for you guys, but I'm going to try and see if you can hear this. So Mike Gundy had made comments about Dan Lanning in Oregon having like $40 million over the last 3 years and Oklahoma State spending like $7 or $8 million over the last 3 years. And then Dan Lanning got asked about that at his press conference.
How much there may be a disparity between these programs.
Yeah, it sounds like there is, listening to him talk. Like I said, I got a ton of respect for Coach Gundy. Ultimately, how blessed are we to be in a place that's invested in winning? If you want to be a top 10 team in college football, you better be invested in winning. And we spend to win. Some people save to have an excuse for why they don't, right? And ultimately, like, he's a great coach. They've done an unbelievable job, but I want to be a team that's competing at the highest level. And we're really fortunate to be in that situation. So I can't speak on their situation. I have no idea, what they got in their pockets over there. I'm sure UT Martin maybe didn't have as much as them last week, and they played. So
how much?
Little spicy there, huh? Little spicy there from Dan Lanning. I mean, he makes a good point at the end. It's like, hey, UT Martin probably didn't have as much money as Oklahoma State, putting that into their roster. Mike Gundy has clearly been behind the curve. I think Oklahoma State fans have been frustrated with that for a while. He's been a little behind the curve when it comes to NIL. I don't think that Gundy was really trying to take a huge shot, was just sort of trying to lay out the reality of it, which he is not wrong about that. But if I'm Dan Lanning, that's definitely going to be my response if anybody's coming after me about money in 2025. Like, hey, yeah, we're Oregon, man. We've got Phil Knight. We're going to spend to win. It's legal now. Why would I not do that? Like, you can't like look down on me for doing that. So I don't know that I would love that if you're hoping Oklahoma State's going to cover today. Feels like if Oregon has the opportunity to pour it on, it's going to be a little bit more motivation to do so. Dan Lanning seems like that kind of a dude anyway. And now you've added a little bit of extra flavor to it throughout this week with the comments about how much money has been spent. Okay, I haven't talked about K-State hardly at all. I'll give you some quick thoughts there because I saw some convo about that in the chat. K-State's playing Army. This game scared me a lot heading into in the offseason, heading into the season. Watching Army lose to Tarleton State, who, by the way, is a better team than who K-State almost lost to last week in North Dakota. That has assuaged some of the fears. Their quarterback is banged up. I think he's going to play, but he is a little banged up. And when you're an Army quarterback, you're going to take hits every single game, like no matter what it is or who you're playing, whatever the situation is, you're going to take hits. That's just the nature of playing. K-State's still without Dylan Edwards. This just feels like if K-State's not going to bring effort, intensity, energy to this game, then when are they going to the rest of the season? Like after what happened last week, that had to be a wake-up call. I know that they've brought in at least one former player to talk about taking pride and wearing the uniform, that whole type of thing this week. I would expect them to have a better effort. I don't think this Army team is good enough to win that game if K-State is in any way, shape, or form motivated. But I would keep your eye on it, and I certainly would not expect it to be overly pretty and glamorous, but it needs to be a multi-score win to get K-State back on track. So I'm not completely sweating out a loss, but as I told you guys in the chat, I also think, I think the floor is low for this K-State team. I think the floor could be like a 4-8 bottom falls out sort of season. I still think their ceiling's probably like 10-2 and competing for a Big 12 championship, but that's only if everything comes together. And the answer almost always is somewhere in between. So as somebody that had K-State at 9-3 going into the year and losing to Iowa State, they're not really off track from a win-loss standpoint to where I expected them. But I don't know if they've got the biggest problem on defense. Chris Kleiman has hammered it in to everybody. It was eye discipline. You definitely are going to have to be pretty disciplined against Army on defense. So that will be a concern. That will be a concern for sure. Let's see. What did you guys want me to talk about? Well, Fongwei says he's predicting an Oklahoma State victory. That's pretty bold, man. That's pretty bold because I'm really scared of what's going to happen to Oklahoma State. Well, Oregon just wants any excuse to beat someone 65-0. I mean, maybe so. Maybe so. Is this a thing? Tarletons? Is that really a thing? People used to smoke Tarletons. I feel like hardly. Did you ask me something about Dylan Edwards at some point in there? Oklahoma State was 2 years ago the only school to play in Arlington, but man, a lot can change and things have fallen off a little bit. Yes, I agree with Bracket Cat. A lot can happen in 2 years. All right, let's get to a couple super chats and I will make some picks here. Alan, thank you for being here. Alan, great to see you, my friend. Alan says, John, this morning I met a Mizzou fan wearing a Beat KU shirt walking down King Street in Alexandria, Virginia. Wow. She saw my KU shirt and simply said, "Die Jayhawk." Whoa. Okay. See, this is what I'm talking about. When I tell you guys Mizzou KU is about as hate-filled a rivalry as you will find, telling you it's there, even in Alexandria, Virginia. Alan, best of luck to your Jayhawks. I will be pulling for the Jayhawks. Do not like Eli Drinkwitz. Had a miserable time in Columbia 2 years ago. We were getting yelled at by sorority girls, nerdy video game guys walking out of a restaurant who didn't even watch the game as we were walking back to our car. People just driving by, yelling things at us. It was a horrendous experience walking out of Columbia 2 years ago after losing on a 60-plus yard field goal at the end of the game. So I do not have a lot of great feelings about the Missouri Tigers. Alan, get it done. Hope you guys get it done. Bill, Gundy Lanning feud and nothing burger. Lanning always runs up the score as much as he can. I mean, yeah, I'm not telling you it's like something incredibly substantive, but it was interesting. I mean, that was fun. That's an interesting little old school, new school battle between the head coaches. I mean, frankly, I probably should have done more on that during the week, during the last live show. because I do think the dynamics of that are really, really interesting. But yes, I don't think it's going to be. Look, the problem is Oklahoma State just doesn't have a roster that right now looks like it can compete with Oregon, and may not have a good enough quarterback to really compete there either. So, Bill, I appreciate it. Thank you for your generous support, my friend. Thank you. Gentle brutality. Baylor +3, Iowa State -3, Kent State +48.5, K-State -17, Oregon -28. Buy or sell. All right, is this like a parlay or just your general card here? Either way, Oregon -28, I like. Unfortunately, look, hope like hell I'm wrong, Poke fans, but Oregon -28, I would like. K-State -17. I just don't trust K-State enough right now. I think from a logical standpoint, you'd say, hey, this is a team with, okay, gentle brutality says parlay. I think if I'm removing myself from it as a K-State fan and someone who's close to the team, I would like that. That's a team that has a pretty high ceiling, that played horrendously at home last week, should be a wake-up call kind of game. So I think you're probably on the right side there technically coming into it, but as someone who's close to the situation, it scares me. Kent State +48.5. It's just such a big number. I certainly would not pick Tech to cover, but that's just because it's such a large number. Like, so many things can happen with guys at mop-up duty. That's it. Iowa State -3, I like. I just think Iowa State's a much better team. Baylor +3, it's tough, man. Baylor really disappointed me last week. This may be another one I'm too close to. Not a huge fan of that. I kind of have my doubts about Baylor today, but I think it's solid. Oregon, I would say Oregon, Kent State, Iowa State are my three favorites there. KU and Baylor a little shakier on, but I'm not here to tell you I'm some against the spread sort of expert there, but appreciate all that. Okay, I got to the super chats. You want some picks real quick? I think I picked K-State by 10 on the 3-Mont pregame show earlier. I'll take Iowa State by 10 over Iowa. I'm going with SMU at home over Baylor, unfortunately, by a touchdown or so. Texas Tech, Kent State. If you ask me to pick a side, I'm probably going Kent State covering the number just because it's so large and anything can happen. But I think Tech will roll and be fine. I already told you I'd probably go Oregon. Kansas, Mizzou, man, I want to go like Kansas outright. I'm going to take Mizzou to win, but I'll say Kansas covers. Right now I'm seeing that number at 5.5. It was at 6.5 earlier this week. Cincinnati, Bowling Green. I actually saw someone say Sharps are on Cincinnati here to cover 22.5. So I'll go Cincy. Colorado 23.5 over Delaware. I mean, they should cover that. I'll take Colorado. West Virginia, Ohio. I'm going to say West Virginia wins. I think it'll be close though, and it's 3.5. I might take West Virginia by 3. So Ohio covers, West Virginia wins. No line on Utah, Cal Poly. They should be fine. I think Houston will wax Rice. Willie Fritz, I think, understands the importance of that game. I think they'll win by a couple of touchdowns. Arizona State, reluctantly, I'm going to take by 10. I sure hope they cover. UCF, North Carolina, A&T. I wouldn't imagine there's a lot of problem there. Arizona, Weber State, same thing. And BYU -20.5 against Stanford. I'll probably take BYU there. Stanford obviously has not looked very impressive at all. I'll take BYU by like 24 to win that game at home tonight in Provo. But all right, here we are. Games are starting. I'm going to get on out of here, start watching some football. Thank you guys for hanging out. Appreciate the response to this today. Let me know what you think. Anything you'd like to see here, hit me up in the comments. Hit me up on Twitter at JL Kurtz. Subscribe to the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, ofbnews.com. And you can respond to those emails to get in touch with me as well. So appreciate all you guys. Like, subscribe to the channel, spread the word, and take care. Enjoy your college football Saturday, my friends.